Welcome to Spiritual Realism with Nathan. I'm your host, Nathan. Today we're going to have a little fun. We're going to prove some mysticism, and we're going to have fun with a pretty hate-filled fellow that I found online today. Let's give it a look.
Spiritualism, it's so fucking annoying. It really pisses me off. And why does it piss me off? Because people seem to assume that spiritualism, unlike a god, unlike a religion, spiritualism doesn't need an explanation. It doesn't need an explanation because it's spiritualism. It's what? You know, people believing in their inner selves, their spiritual enlightenment, their inner God, all this absolute bullshit. There is somebody who calls himself a guru, for instance, who would say, perhaps in the Hindu religion, but you also find these sort of Buddhist gurus as well, and they're all calling themselves spiritualists. And they have absolutely no evidence in the same way that every other religion doesn't.
So before we actually hear from any gurus or anything about any occult knowledge or mysticism, let's go ahead and hear what quantum physics has to say. Roll the clip.
The famous double-slit experiment. To understand this experiment, we first need to see how ordinary particles, or little balls of matter, act. If we shoot small objects, such as marbles, at a screen containing a single slit, we see a pattern form where they went through the slit and hit on the back wall. Now, if we add a second slit, we would expect to see two bands directly behind the slits. Now, let's look at waves. The waves hit the slit and radiate out, striking the back wall with the most intensity directly in line with the slit. The line of brightness on the back screen shows that intensity. This is similar to the line the marbles make. But when we add the second slit, something different happens. If the top of one wave meets the bottom of another wave, they cancel each other out. So now, there is an interference pattern on the back wall. Places where the two tops meet are the highest intensity, the bright lines. And where they cancel, there is nothing. So when we shoot particles such as matter through two slits, we get this, two bands of hits. And with waves, we get an interference pattern of many bands. Good so far. Now, let's go quantum. An electron is a tiny bit of matter, like a tiny marble. Let's fire a stream through one slit. It behaves just like the marbles, a single band. So, if we shoot these tiny particles through two slits, we should get, like the marbles, two bands. What? An interference pattern? We fired electrons. Tiny bits of matter through, but we get a pattern like waves, not like little marbles. How? How could pieces of matter create an interference pattern like a wave? It doesn't make sense. But physicists are clever. They thought maybe those little balls are bouncing off of each other and creating that pattern. So they decide to shoot electrons through one at a time. There is no way they could interfere with each other. But after an hour of this, the same interference pattern is seen to emerge. The conclusion is inescapable. The single electron leaves as a particle, becomes a wave of potentials, goes through both slits and interferes with itself to hit the wall like a particle. But mathematically, it's even stranger. It goes through both slits, and it goes through neither, and it goes through just one, and it goes through just the other. All of these possibilities are in superposition with each other. But physicists were completely baffled by this. So, they decided to peek and see which slit it actually goes through. They put a measuring device by one slit to see which one it went through and let it fly. But the quantum world is far more mysterious than they could have imagined. When they observed, the electron went back to behaving like a little marble. It produced a pattern of two bands, not an interference pattern of many. The very act of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. This led to many questions. What is matter? Marbles or waves? And waves of what? And what does an observer have to do with any of this? It was as if the electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware it was being watched. It seemed as if the observer somehow collapsed the wave function simply by observing.
Okay, so now let's see how that compares to a well-known guru and how he views spirituality.
Now, circumstances, on the other end, have, in a sense, no power whatsoever. They have no meaning whatsoever. They are simply reflections, giving you in a very playful manner, if you allow it to be playful. In a very playful manner, they reflect to you who you have chosen yourself to be on a vibrational level, on a belief system level, on a conviction level. Whatever you believe, you will see. Believing is seeing. This is true. This is a mechanical universal truth. Whatever you believe will be made manifest so that you can see what you believe.
And here's a clip of just one more science experiment, once again, proving the power of thought and the law of attraction.
Now, many of you may have heard of something called the Rice experiment, and it links back to Mr. Emoto's discovery, in that water can absorb and store the influences of thoughts and feelings, which were proven in an experiment which, by the way, has been duplicated countless times here on YouTube. And it all surrounded 3 jars that were placed on a table, each containing an equal amount of dried rice. Each glass would then be filled up with an equal amount of water from the same source, whereby he would then once a day walk up to each glass. To one glass of rice, he would say, "I love you." He would then walk over to the next glass and say the word "idiot." And finally, he would completely ignore the third glass. And after some days of doing this, it was revealed that the rice with which he said he loved had begun fermenting, with a beautiful white color to the rice and a rich aroma. In the glass of rice that he ignored, it had turned completely black. And finally, the last glass, with which he hurled negative insults, the rice began to rot, proving that water, by some unknown means, had actually understood what he was saying and changed its molecular structure based on that. And as I said earlier, this experiment has been documented in countless YouTube videos with people wanting to try it at home, and it's always the same result.
So there you have it. It's not that there's no evidence to support what we believe. It's simply that science is just now, in the 21st century, beginning to catch up with what we have known to be true and seen to be true through experience for so many centuries. So the next time somebody wants to tell you that you're crazy or insane, you can bring up the Rice experiment. Bring up quantum physics. Bring up the double slit experiment. These are scientific backings to what you believe. I hope you'll join us next time. I'm sure it'll be just as entertaining. Until then, blessed be.